We often hear from lawmakers in Republican-led states after legislation that limits or bans abortions is passed, but we don't often hear from the women and their families whose lives are directly impacted by these restrictive laws. This morning, we have one of those women from Florida joining us to share her deeply personal story. Deborah Dorbert learned that she was pregnant last August, but 23 weeks into what seemed to be a normal pregnancy, just before Thanksgiving, an ultrasound revealed the baby suffered from a lethal condition called Potter syndrome. Babies with Potter syndrome often die before they're born or suffocate within minutes or hours after birth. After agonizing over what to do, Deborah and her family made the extremely difficult decision to terminate the pregnancy. But her doctors and their lawyers refused, fearful they would run afoul of Florida's 15-week abortion ban. Just last week, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis signed a law moving that ban up to 6 weeks. Deborah's primary care doctor was so frustrated with the situation, he spoke out on social media.
So I have a patient who is about 32 weeks pregnant, who found out back in November that her fetus is not going to survive. There are no developing bladder or kidneys, and therefore that's incompatible with life. Now, because of the new Florida abortion laws that have been passed by the Republicans here, she has to carry this baby to term, which is at least to 37 weeks. Now, there is no doctor willing to terminate this pregnancy because of the laws that are here and the concern that the government could come after a physician.
Without any other feasible options, Deborah was forced to carry the pregnancy to term, delivering the baby who died shortly after birth. If you could tell us about that, the experience of having to go to full term with a baby that you knew would not survive, and what your reaction was when you heard that you didn't have the option to take care of yourself and perhaps lessen the pain of the baby.
When we had found out, it was right before Christmas, and it was very heartbreaking because I knew the next couple of months was not going to be easy, both mentally and physically. I dealt with a lot of, and I'm still dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety, and just the physical pain through the pregnancy, because there was no amniotic fluid, so there was no cushion for the baby. So, I mean, the baby was pushing up on my ribs and my SI and my round ligament. And so it was very painful, and obviously I can't take any medicine because I still am pregnant. So I felt down into like deep depression and just was in pain all the time.
I know that experience that you all went through, having the baby, is too hard to talk about, which is completely understandable. We reached out to the hospital that you went to for a response. We didn't hear back, but a spokesman for the Lakeland Regional Health Hospital System the doctors are affiliated with did provide a statement to the Washington Post when it reached out for comment. They declined to discuss Deborah's case specifically or how it is interpreting the new law. The spokesman's statement reads in part, Lakeland Regional Health complies with all laws in the state of Florida. What if this was your wife or your daughter? These tragic scenarios can happen to all women. A termination of a fetus that won't survive saves a woman's life and saves her from months of having to carry the baby to term and the mental health complications and the trauma of watching their baby die. Many Republicans want you to believe that abortion is a lazy woman's option to kill a baby rather than nurture it to life, a sin. The reality is that women are already experiencing the ramifications, as you just saw, of Roe being overturned. There are women right now with unviable babies growing in their bellies who cannot get the termination they need to save their lives and to end their pain. Just like we see in the response to one mass shooting after another, Republicans are playing a game that they will ultimately lose. In the long run, they will lose elections. In the short one, there will be a moment, possibly, when a woman they love needs health care, and she won't be able to get it because of their extreme, contrived, condescending, short-sighted version of what it means to have an abortion. I hate that they will have to learn the hard way about the damage they are causing women across the country and their families. It seems like we shouldn't have to spell it out in 2023, but here we are. Let's bring in co-founder and CEO of All In Together, Lauren Leader, and Katty Kay is still with us as well for this conversation. Lauren, that interview, my God, I'm actually at a loss of words.
First of all, incredibly courageous of them to speak out publicly about something so painful, and incredibly courageous of this show to take on this conversation and all the things you just said, Mika. We can't look away. We need Americans to understand the implications of this, and we're just starting to understand them, because as the months tick by, following the horrific decision last year to overturn Roe v. Wade, we're starting to understand the very real consequences. And she couldn't have said it better at the end.
No.
How could lawmakers possibly be qualified?
You know, and they were scared to leave Florida. They were scared
Right.
about these laws. These are, you know, human beings that are just trying to get through.
And in the middle of a medical crisis, to say that women are supposed to then get in a car or get on a plane and drive, I mean, that's just not even
Transplant
viable.
their family. They don't have the money.
And even if you do have the money, I mean, then you put your health at risk to do that. I mean, this is why my mother and all of the women of her generation fought their entire adult lives for Roe v. Wade, because they understood the real life implications of government involvement in healthcare and the devastating consequences on women's lives. You cannot legislate women's health care when it is this complicated. Those are the consequences. There are thousands more women living through the same kind of things like the Durbirds.
The living hell.
And Katty, these stories are only going to grow more common as we see more and more states across this country pass legislation that it's going to put more families like that one, that brave one we just heard, in this exact same dire situation.
Yeah, and it's good that we tell the stories of these women. Just last week, actually, also in Florida, the Washington Post had a big investigative piece about two women who had terrible complications with their pregnancies. And just like Deborah, they couldn't get the treatment that they needed. One of them ended up delivering a fetus in a bathroom because she couldn't get help in a hospital. I mean, it's just, this is I don't know whether when the Supreme Court was going through this, they had conversations about all of the other types of circumstances, of which, you know, Mika, you laid them out so well. When women need medical help, when they need abortions, it's the same treatment. The DNC that is used in an abortion is the same treatment that is used to terminate a pregnancy where there's a fetal inviolability. And I just don't think that was even discussed by the Supreme Court. You know, if Republicans have been blindsided by this, they don't seem to be doing much to try and stop the rollback of these rules. You know, in Florida, we've just spoken to one woman. There's a case of two other women, and the changes in the law is still going ahead.
Right. I mean, and the consequences just continue. I mean, the other piece of this, right, which, Rev, you and I have talked about a bit, is the religious liberty side of this, which is really interesting. One of the cases that's also from Florida, which is getting overlooked, is that in Jewish law, by Jewish law, the life of the mother must be prioritized. And in fact, Judaism doesn't recognize life before birth. And there are religious freedom cases being brought in the state of Florida by Jewish women who feel that the abortion laws there are actually a violation of their religious freedom. I mean, the layers of this, the numbers of sort of litigation. But, you know, Rev, like, it also just feels like a moral issue. Like, how do we justify morally the suffering that is being inflicted on all these families?
I don't think you can. And I think that more and more faith leaders are standing up with courage saying that. I also think that we have to say that this should not be fought by women alone. I think one of the things that was so compelling about this morning was the strength of that woman and her husband to stand there with
Yes.
her. Men need to stand up and say, I'm standing by my wife, my woman, my daughter, whatever, having the courage to do this. And it's bad enough they have to suffer this. It's worse if they have to do it alone. Where are the real men? Because she did not get pregnant alone. So let's stand up and be real men.
Where are they? I totally agree. Jonathan Lemire.
No, it is certainly true. And this is, we often talk about, of course, on this show, abortion is a political issue, but this is such a human story. And Mika, just, again, the bravery of that family coming forward.
Amazing. Co-founder and CEO of All In Together, Lauren Leader, thank you so much for being on this morning. That does it for us this morning, and they do.